Hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and this is your Rattlecast for Tuesday, November 12th. We have another great show lined up for you today. Our guest will be Wally Swist, the Massachusetts poet, a naturalist and spiritualist kind of poet, also a haiku poet. So I hope you enjoy that. It's, 5:46 my time. That means that Wally will be on in about 14 minutes, so if you're watching this rebroadcast and want to tune back in later, skip ahead 14 minutes to get to Wally. But for now, we're doing the pre-show, just hanging out, making sure everything's working. If you're on the chat, say hi. We're going to play a few poems, kind of relax, see what's going on. Yesterday, as you know, was Veterans Day in the United States and Armistice Day everywhere else. So I thought I'd play a few poems by veterans to start off. Let's see. So let's go over to the... Now this is Bill Glose, a poem from issue number... Let's see, it's a pretty long one as you can see. Issue number 58. And this is a really interesting form. This is an erasure poem that erases itself. So there's 3 poems, phase line Whiskey, Alpha, and Romeo, which is, of course, WAR for war. And each subsequent poem is a further erasure of the previous. And it's a really interesting format. So here we go with Bill Glose. And I should say Bill Glose is an award-winning writer whose honors include among many others, the Missouri Humanities Council Award for Veterans Poetry. He's the author of 4 books of poetry, most recently Virginia Walkabout. And he says in his note about this, for 10 years after serving in the Army, I followed the example of my father, a Vietnam veteran, and kept my experiences as a combat platoon leader bottled inside. Then I started attending open mics, where each time a poet shared his or her personal burden, the crowd would lift them up. It was then I started writing my war, the long-kept secrets and the hidden pains leaking out, one cathartic driblet at a time. So it's a great note by Bill Glose, and here he is reading Phases of Erasure, A Soldier's Journey.
Phases of Erasure, A Soldier's Journey. 1. Phase line Whiskey. Love was the first word uttered after Mama and Papa, who scratched your babbling language into a memory book to mark milestones from your childhood, a dictionary that grew wide as distance between stars. The first time a new principle was introduced, gravity keeps us down, it's impossible to disappear. You always questioned why. Your parents encouraged you to walk, to run, to leap. Your mind knew nothing of boundaries, the barriers preventing fantasies from becoming real. In your world, matters of the soul harmonized with crickets' heartbeats. When neighborhood kids trampled the line of daylilies by the duck pond, you cried, confused by cheerful shows of power and dominance. Your lust was for all things green and growing. Not a thing flew in the blue sky that did not make you want to soar. Fireworks on 4th of July made you think of kaleidoscopes, the sparkled bombs exploding high up in the black, and the tattered, tumbling cardboard shrapnel of falling leaves. Dreams full of joy, a boy in your pajamas flying out of bed, no pain when you thudded to the carpet in a room filled with matchbox cars and toy soldiers. Your last thought on nights when the full moon swallowed your window, wondering if tomorrow you might wake up on its foreign soil, wondering whether life would be cockeyed, peering down through your window like a mourner peeking into a grave, or if your beating heart would still find magic among its craters. God knows how many times you took apart toasters and clocks, having to know what slows the hour hand, which cog locks in with which gear to combat the slippage of seconds. And how many times you picked through trash cans, searching every nook, prying apart shadows until each hidden treasure becomes yours. The only enemy you'd ever known was ignorance. The only mystery, how every unturned stone did not ignite everyone's curiosity. Who can hide the longest was your favorite game. The cavern behind your captain's bed becoming an improvised fort in which you'd sit for hours, imagining devices that might make you invisible, that might make your ridiculous wants come true. You longed to turn the magic spinning through your body into something tangible, an overcoat you could drape over inanimate objects to give them life, to fill every empty space with ideas stitched from the fabric of your dictionary, until the last void stoppers with the very last word. Your parents took away your only pet, a turtle, after exploring fingers got stuck a third time in its shell, asking, "But what is inside?" You hated not touching the answer, something so full of possibility. 2. Phase line alpha. Love was the first word scratched from your dictionary, the first principle to disappear. Your parents knew nothing of the real world, matters of the heart trampled by power and lust. Not a thing flew in the blue sky that did not make you think of bombs and shrapnel. Dreams of pain filled your nights, wondering if tomorrow foreign soil would be your grave. Your beating heart knows how time slows in combat, how every shadow becomes the enemy, how every unturned stone can hide an improvised device that wants to turn your body into an inanimate object, to empty your dictionary until the last word in its shell is hate. 3. Phase line Romeo. Nothing matters. Not the blue sky, not dreams of tomorrow. Your beating heart slows, becomes stone.
Yeah, and that was Bill Glose with an incredible poem, Phases of Erasure. You can find more of Bill Glose's work at billglose.com. That's BILLGLOSE. That was just such a creative poem, a self-erasure, and so powerful. I think if I remember right, I think we nominated that for a Pushcart Prize. But it's a great poem by a great poet, and thank you for your service, Bill Glose. Okay, now next up we're going to have another veteran poet. This is Jim Valvis with his poem Mail Call. And Jim has published hundreds of poems in journals, including Plowshares, The Sun, and Rattle, including his 2019 Neil Postman Award-winning poem, The Distracted. His work has also appeared in Best of the Net and Best American Poetry. And he lives in Washington with his family. And this is his poem from last fall, Mail Call.
Mail Call. We huddled around the drill sergeant like kids before a buff Santa and waited for our white envelopes. Night after night, nothing came for me. No girlfriend or wife, family disinterested, friends floating in the swells of their lives. Once I thought of writing myself a letter and sending it in the morning post to receive it sometime later that week, so recruits would not pat my back in pity before stumbling to their bunks to read the happenings of things back home. After 6 weeks of this, one man, Barr, began sharing his wife's intimate letters, encouraging me to open them, read them, smell the patchouli sprayed onto their seal. It embarrassed me, this making a comrade a kind of literary cuckold. Before, handing the letter back and not having read her words, only lipped them for his benefit. But it was like that in the military sometimes. People shared what could not be shared. A buckle, a spare bullet at the range, the last of one's canteen Kool-Aid. And sometimes, many years later, in a far different mail call, that man's war death, as the nauseating news arrived in the plain, modest white envelope, written in that woman's familiar hand, smelling of new smoke and old perfume.
And that was James Valvis, I should say, reading Mail Call. You can find more of James' work at valvis.net, or if you type James Valvis into YouTube, he's got a YouTube channel too. And that poem we did nominate for a Pushcart Prize last year. I think we gave The Distracted the Neil Postman Award, and Mail Call the Pushcart nomination, so we wouldn't feel left out. But those were a pair of really great poems by James Valvis. He's been on a roll lately. Let's see, we have 3 minutes. I have one more short poem for you. This one is not by a veteran, but about a veteran. So this is a good short poem to end up the pre-show on. And here we go. This is Aaron Brown's Old Man Watching Dunkirk. And Aaron Brown's the author of the poetry collection Acacia Road, winner of the 2017 Gerald Cable Book Award from Silverfish Review Press. He lives in Texas, where he's a professor of English and directs the Writing Center at LaTourneau University. And here is reading Old Man Watching Dunkirk. This was from Poets Respond about a year ago, last summer, when the movie Dunkirk came out.
Old Man Watching Dunkirk. When he stood, his knees shook, shoulders bending in the light of the credits, letters streaming like eyes at a memorial, scrolling names, those who've crafted a narrative we might enter. There aren't many left to remind us never to go back, not many left to say, I've seen what hatred can do, not many like this old man, ghosted against a fading screen. He was the last to leave the theater.
Yeah, so that was Aaron Brown reading Old Man Watching Dunkirk from Poets Respond, July 30th, 2017. I guess that was 2 years ago that Dunkirk came out. Okay, we got 1 minute to go. I should just say, Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit promoting the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995, and if you like what we do here, if you enjoy these podcasts, no matter where you're listening, please do click the subscribe button or give it 5 stars if you're on iTunes, or give it a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or share it if you're on Facebook. Just whatever you can to spread stuff around social media, because that is the name of the game. Eyeballs are the currency these days. We don't ask for donations, but we do ask that you share this stuff, because hopefully it's valuable. And if you find it valuable, please do share it. Okay, so we're going to pull up the splash screen, throw on the bumper music, and I'm going to give Wally Swist a call. So I'll be right back. Hang on with me just 1 minute. Okay, so we have Wally Swist on the line. Wally Swist is a prolific poet. He's published about 36 books of poetry and nonfiction and chapbooks. He was for 30 years a bookseller, so we might talk a little bit about that. I'm always curious to talk about booksellers. For 10 years, he was the book reviews editor for Modern Haiku, and his most recent book is The Bees of the Invisible, which I'll put up right here. There's Bees of the Invisible, poems by Wally Swist. He has 3 books, I think, within the last year, if I remember right. So he's going to read from mostly Bees of the Invisible, but some of the other books too. Like I said, Wally Swist is very prolific. And I'm bringing him right now. Hello, Wally Swist.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
And you're out in Massachusetts, right? I have the little screen tag, right?
Yes, Western Massachusetts.
Ah, great. Is it terribly cold out there? I think I remember hearing there's a blizzard and things going on everywhere else but here.
Actually, it's going down to the mid-teens tonight, so it's pretty cold. Yeah.
So Wally, do you want to start out with just reading a poem to sort of break the ice?
Sure, I'd love that. I intend to rather read maybe a dozen poems from the Bees of the Invisible. This is September morning. Mm-hmm. Sky clear after rain, alleviating 6 weeks of drought, sunny with a hint of coolness in the shadows beside the barn, and under the trees, speckled with a fringe of fleabane, the orb weaver web on the porch, sticky with spiral capture silk, containing another victim, a praying mantis wrapped in a winding sheet, and the Queen Anne's lace bending in the meadow under the weight of a heavy dew.
Very nice. Thanks, Wally. So I've heard you described as a nature and spiritual poet. And that kind of fits in perfectly as the first poem to read because, it just fits perfectly with that. So what does that mean to you, that being a nature and spiritual poet?
For me, much of my inspiration, well, 2 things at least. Most of my inspiration comes from the source is nature. I have spiritual practices, so I also draw from that. What else can I say? I've also in the past few years I've written quite a few political poems. Mm-hmm. I had actually intended to read a poem tonight entitled "Walt Whitman on Donald Trump."
Oh yeah, I see that there.
I also think that I often write through the matrix of the natural world. I might be writing about another theme or another topic, but I'll use nature, especially nature, to express that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm getting some feedback. Is it possible to put the headphones on? Because I think it's coming back at me.
Sure, sorry, Tim.
Oh, no problem at all.
How's that?
That's much better. I can't hear myself anymore. Okay.
Oh, good.
So you mentioned your spiritual practice. What is your spiritual practice? That's one of the things I love talking to people about most is spirituality. Because to me, poetry is sort of my spiritual practice. I think poems are kind of like prayers. And
well, they are.
Yeah. So what is your spiritual practice?
Well, I have to say that my spiritual life is informed by several diverse practices. Many years ago, I practiced Zazen seriously, but that was more years ago than I'd like to even quote or relay. I've been reading a lot of work by Steve Taylor, mm-hmm. who's a Brit, and also earlier in the year I was reading the work of Russell Williams, who actually Steve Taylor edited a book of his called "Not I, Not Other Than I," Russell Williams was actually the president of the Manchester Buddhist Society for about 45 or so years. And although he wasn't quite widely read, he had an awakening in his late 20s, early 30s in the 1950s. And it was quite a provided quite a bit of resonance for his own spiritual life. He is considered to be a master teacher.
Mm-hmm. Do you spend a lot of time, in the woods? There are a lot of poems about hiking, and do you get out a lot?
Do I get out a lot?
Yeah.
Probably not as much as I would like, but certainly in previous years, I certainly have hiked. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Well, do you want to read a couple more poems?
I'd love to.
Excellent. And I have all the page numbers, so this is great that you printed them out ahead of time, so I know exactly where you're going to go.
Well, good. Next poem I'd like to read is entitled The Space Between, and this is for Christine Cody, who is the editor and publisher of Shanti Arts. The Space Between. There's a lot to be said for being able to appreciate the uncertain space between winter and spring, an unusually long space this year after an unending winter. Easy enough to mention finding wood anemone, bluets, trout lily, and violets. What is radiant draws us, holds our attention, replenishes our hope in the seeds of regeneration springing into flower. This serves us, as does Nadezhda Mandelstam in Hope Against Hope when she gives back the egg her husband Osip had begged from neighbors for her supper before he was arrested under orders by Stalin and taken to be imprisoned in the Gulag. Being grateful to witness the space between winter and spring is a grace few of us fully fathom. That grayness between the melting ice and snow and the brittle emptiness of the leaf litter beneath the budless trees. This may resemble the truth we seek more than the hope we gird ourselves with to staunch the ruthlessness of an authoritarian regime, intolerant of compassion or our cognizance of what is moral. The space may prove to be a meditative and more prudent path to take between the grayness of one season and the animation of another, before we are truly surprised by an indescribable joy upon seeing the ineffable yellow flowers spangled by the lily and the speckled whiteness of anemone that mark the distance between winter and spring. There's a lot to be said about oppression and freedom, between our seeking truth and the abundant hope found in the young black snake's sinuousness sliding between the first wildflowers, or a cotillion of box turtles sunning on a log. Would you like me to read another poem, too?
Yeah. Why don't you read a few? Read like maybe 3 or 4.
Okay, this is Hawk Feathers.
Okay.
This is much shorter. Mid-February snow melt mud. Mid-February snow melt mud. The fields expanse. At the southern edge, a porcupine barks and bristles, edges away into a clutch of winterberry, hemlock forest, blight of woolly adelgid, green club moss, browned bracken along the border. Beyond, the trail winds amid trees, blowing mist spreads through branches. Here, hawk feathers litter the ground, one cluster, then another. Breaking down in the drizzle, I gather one feather, another, and another, reaching each time for an answer. This next poem is entitled Lullaby, and it's an adaptation. The past year or two, couple of years, I've been adapting poems by Rainer Maria Rilke, ones that I've actually lived with for about 45 years. This is called Lullaby. This is forthcoming in a magazine called Transference, which explores the process of translation out of Western Michigan University. This is entitled Lullaby. If I lose you one day, will you then sleep alone without my murmuring beside you, as do the branches of the linden? Without my lying beside you, always astir and leaving you with my words, lowered as eyelids across your breasts, your arms, your mouth. Without my watching over you, so I might secure you, so you can be alone with who you are, as in a garden among clusters of aromatic mint, with spicy star anise. I'm going to move from the sublime of that poem to a poem that appeared in Eureka Street in Australia, which is published by some Franciscans down there. This is entitled Walt Whitman on Donald Trump. Oh, you snake oil selling provocateur, you faux gilded imposter, selling authoritarianism for American democracy. May you choke on your own phlegm-filled speeches, your conspiratorial rants, your endless quiver of lies, whose equivocal insults you brandish and shoot like arrows at those whose integrity you should quaver beneath instead of belittling. You choose to ruin and impede instead of build and facilitate. Your brand of hatred scars and lacerates, leaving a barren swath in its wake. You've long ago made a deal with the devil, and even he has stepped outside, or rather aside from your burning wrath and vehemence. May the best in us topple you, and the ugliness of your kind. May we persevere in preserving our largesse and swamp you in the imbecility of our own making, of your own making rather, your smallness of character or lack thereof entirely, the soulless fluke that you are, whose odious turpitude rages in the monstrous wake you leave. For the history you will never be able to rewrite, the dark legacy for which you will become known, and the spiritual insolvency with which you have defrauded all of the people. May the echoes of your offensive and irritating pseudo-flamboyance ring in your own ears. May your defiant, wind-up toy impressions of how and what eloquent presidents walk and talk like strike you down in your spitefulness. May you crawl like the worm that you are. May we inhabit the earth. I'll just keep on going, Tim, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you skipped the Bees of the Invisible, though. I don't want to skip the title poem.
No, actually, I just switched those around. I'll be reading that next.
Oh, okay.
This is the eponymous poem. This is the Bees of the Invisible, and I'm really pleased to note that this poem will be featured. I'm the featured poet in the winter issue of Sufi Journal, and I'm quite delighted by that. This is the Bees of the Invisible, and it's prefaced by a quote by Rainer Maria Rilke. We widely gather the honey of the invisible in order to store it in the great golden hive of the invisible, the bees of the invisible. I recognize a sacredness in the Kusa dogwood this morning, as I have no other morning, noticing its red fruit ripening among the branches that the barnyard squirrel will gorge on when it is at its peak, which marks the end of summer and autumn's incipience. How difficult it is to give up August's lushness in all of its wildness to the glorious diminishment of September, with its flashy golden days, the mornings drenched with heavy dew, each one surprising as purple asters appearing amid the cool shadows of the grass. In winter, when the snow accrues, the rabbits that burrow in the juniper hedge emerge to nibble the bark the dogwood, since they are unable to browse, and they strip a few inches from the base of the tree. But now I am drawn to the counterpoint of the catbird's cry, and then the throbbing pulse of cicadas. In making things whole, the bees of the invisible hover above deep blue stands of chicory, lingering amid the flat tops of Queen Anne's lace that flourish among the leaning swaths of timothy's newly gilt inflorescence.
That's a beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing those, Wally. Let me ask a little bit. Everybody who always wants to know about process, and you are a prolific poet. You've written 36 books. What's your writing process like? Do you write every day, and how do you find inspiration with so much going on?
Those are really good questions, Tim. Well, I don't consider myself prolific. I consider Joyce Carol Oates prolific, but I feel that I have a body of work. So I keep on working. And the last dozen years or so, the last decade has been, after leaving the book business about 12 years ago, I felt I needed to reinvent myself, but I felt that I also always wanted to edit and write, which is what I've been doing for a living over the last few years. But to answer your question regarding process, I've been for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been listening to guidance. That's how I phrase it. And that sounds rather mystical or spiritual, but I do. There's certainly it's more than inner voice. It's really more of an inner direction, and I've often been directed or guided. As I say, to sit down and write, to follow different directions. Do I write every day? I'm usually working with writing every day, so I think that's how I can answer that.
Mm-hmm. Did you write a lot while you were working in managing a bookstore, or did you sort of come back to writing more recently?
Well, I've always written over the last nearly 50 years, so and published. But I have to say that when I was managing a bookstore, that would be a 45 or 50 or sometimes 55-hour week. So I would. When I was working on the book that was published by Southern Illinois University Press, one poem, The Dimensions of Love, which Yusuf Kumanyaka selected for the Crab Orchard Series Open Poetry Competition, I worked on that book for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I'd come back from work, from managing the store, whatever store I was managing, either at Trinity College or at UMass in Amherst, and I take off my jacket and hang it on the back of the chair and revise and work on those poems. And I did that for 7 years. Mm-hmm. So writing has always been, as you say, I think it has a spiritual character and quality about it, and it certainly can be itself a spiritual path. So I think that's how I can answer that. I've considered writing a discipline, and one whose discipline I've followed the rigors of. Although, even when you do, that doesn't guarantee success. So one has to persevere. But I think the main thing is the work. Whatever the work is, I think that's the most significant aspect of writing. I'm not sure it's either publication, but it's the work itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you're working as a bookseller. You're working in universities. Is that what you said?
Well, I've worked kind of all aspects of the book business. I was an antiquarian in used books. Mm-hmm. I also love new books, and for many years I represented small independent presses, and was really quite devoted to that. Mm-hmm. I put many books into people's hands. Tess Gallagher, Raymond Carver, writers too many to even list. So it's it was, I felt I might, especially when I was much younger, I felt that regarding the book business, I might not ever become a successful writer, but I love literature, and I had reading series, and I hosted authors, and um, I in some stores I was able to represent both, well, all three, used, antiquarian, and new. But my last iterations, I worked with new books.
And what do you think about, what do you think the future of books is? That's the thing, for somebody who's been in the business for a long time. Do you think, I heard somebody describe it as in the future, a book will be like an opera that we hold in our hands. I like that phrase, but I wonder, do you think books in the digital age have longevity? Do you think that people are going to always read books? Or do you think that the voice will take over? Because this platform we're on now is sort of like the Gutenberg, the movable type printing press for the voice and for the for video, and it makes it accessible to everybody in the same way for really cheap and really easy to distribute. Do you think that will replace books, or do books have something that that new digital media can't replicate?
I think that's a very good question, especially the way that you fleshed it out. I'd have to say that I think that with the kind of balanced intelligence, this kind of in a sense futuristic Gutenberg that we're doing is certainly exciting, and it's available. It can be made available to many people. This can be a kind of book. Sure, I certainly espouse this. This is wonderful, and not just because you and I are doing it, or I'm doing it with you, but the many authors that you feature and host. However, I think how I can explain it is that at one point a few years ago, I had I had an ebook coming out. It could have been the Southern Illinois University Press book. There was a letterpress broadside that was published of mine, and had a volume coming out. So I think what I'm trying to say is I think we can make use as writers and readers of in intelligent and balanced ways all of the resources that we have at hand. And I don't think we can forget letterpress. I don't think we can forget books, and I can't forget books because I love the tactile quality. Years ago, Tim, I worked in an all poetry bookshop in New Haven, and I was a cataloger there in the late '70s. And we had a standing order with Gehenna Press that published a lot of Leonard Baskin, and some of the books were bound in sheepskin, so they were very sensual to hold. They were books by Ted Hughes, and it was a wonderful thing to just experience holding books like that, fine press books. So I think that that should be something that we should all be able to experience. However, this is something that would reach more the mass audience, and letterpress would not.
Yeah, I think to me that the magic of a book is it's like a mental vacation from technology, and so I think there'll always be a place for it because of that. Like it's so even if you're reading a book on your phone, which is really convenient because you don't have to carry the books. I used to carry on a plane, I'd have a bag full of books, and now I just have the iPad and all the books are there. But there's a way that it's immersive when it's on paper like that, and there's nothing that might pop up and distract you, so your brain's not primed for any kind of interruption, and so you can really get lost in a book in a way that you can't. And my hope is that as time goes on, we will use that as sort of as a vacation for our brains, and books will become even more popular. That's kind of my hope. I don't know if it's a wishful thinking, but that's what I'm hoping.
I think that's really well phrased. I think taking a vacation from technology isn't a bad thing, even on a daily basis. And just holding a book and reading a book can be really special.
Yeah, and we're at a phase where as somebody who writes a lot about nature, you can really appreciate it. I think that we're coming through a time where getting back into nature is something that people have a longing for too. And so I think there's sort of a rebound that's coming, maybe, both for nature and for books. At least one can hope.
Let's hope.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to read a few more poems?
I would love that.
And I should say, if anybody who's watching live now has any questions for Wally, just let me know in the chat and I'll pass them along. But for now, we'll read some more poems.
That sounds great. I'm going to be reading a poem called Pandan, Pandan. It's from a triptych of poems that I wrote in the Talcott Arboretum at Mount Holyoke College. Pandan. I'll be reading one of these. We sit on a green wooden bench in the Talcott Arboretum at Mount Holyoke, opposite the subtropical pandanus, whose family is also known as screw pine, an ancient food source, and since the mid-Cretaceous, an ancient food source used since the mid-Cretaceous. Its inflorescences are spikes, umbels, or terminally borne racemes, whose brightly colored subtended spathes were nowhere to be seen on this winter day, the snow falling beyond the greenhouse windows. We sit in bliss, holding hands, meditating together on the wild extravagance of the green sheaves, of how the pandanus utilis might be compared to the hubbub of a lavish, hot cuisine dinner party, or more apt, the fourth chakra, our heart center, pleasure supreme, consummated sensual love. The pandan is so lush that even in death it is beautiful. The tips of its serrated sword-like leaves turn from an aesthetic translucent yellow to a handsome herbal brown. The plant's infectious lushness instills a sense of joy. It fills us with its commercial radiance, warming us in our inner ascendancy, altering us, alerting us rather, that what is beyond is something more than just the noon sun haloed by snow clouds. Ley lines. We walk up Pine Hill Road in Conway this Saturday afternoon, early April buds spearing up through the muddy ground. It is nearly 20 years since we last drove up the steep hill that summer. We parked the car beside the stone wall of the meadow, just past the Archibald McLeish homestead, and picnicked in the hayed meadow. Where we now stand, Mount Monadnock can be seen clearly in the distance in southern New Hampshire. Tall stands of pines rock in the brisk wind. We survey the meadow after 20 winters and 20 springs, the alder grove that has sprung up, the hummocks and tussocks that provide character to its bumpy ground. The tangled tall grass is tawny before the sunlight can green it into sheaves, then brown it again, wind-whipped and leaning, beaten down in places where deer may have lain to weather the frigid winter cold. This is where we found the grace in laying down a memory with a straw picnic basket containing sandwiches, wine, and fruit, where we now revisit and experience how that time still exists, will always be a part of us and our own mythology, the winds buffeting us. We embrace, find ourselves in the timelessness of our lives together, reaching out for each other's aging hands, touching what it is that reconnects us to the ley lines of our existence.
Hey, thanks so much, Wally. It's definitely better now. I don't know what the issue was there, but I'm glad. I should have hung up and called you back earlier.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Let me ask you another question. You were book reviews editor for Modern Haiku for over a decade, I think it said. What did you learn about writing poetry by reviewing haiku for so long?
Well, I've always, for decades now, I've actually straddled the two worlds between the larger pond of verse, of not just verse, of poetry, and the smaller pond of haiku. As a book reviewer, and also as a bookseller, what I tried to do in my reviewing for that decade was to try to introduce into and inculcate into the haiku community how certain books might be well made, and also to try to learn and be aware of the larger resonances in the other worlds of poetry. I think that's how I can explain that. I still write. I actually stopped writing haiku for about a decade in the early 2000s and was actually summoned back by a couple of people, one man named John Barlow, who edits Snapshot Press in the UK, which is probably the finest independent press publishing the very best haiku in the world, globally. And I do have a practice. One of my practices actually is also writing haiku, and it's really a poem or a poetry of mindfulness. So you can have a mindfulness practice, which is both aesthetic and also spiritual. So I think that's some of my thinking about haiku. Did I answer your question, Tim? I'm not sure if I did.
Yeah, I think you did. And but you brought up another question that I'm kind of always curious about. Why do you think that you mentioned that it's two worlds, haiku and sort of the broader world of verse? Why do you think they're firewalled like that? That's always kind of been baffling to me.
I think that's a very wonderful question, but it's a very insightful one. I think that I think it's how haiku is taught. How can it be brief? I myself began writing 575 45 more or plus years ago when I was 20, and 5 syllables, 7 syllable, 5 syllable lines. And I, of course, the Haiku Society of America pretty much has established that maybe 14 syllables might be the best. So I think that what I ended up doing was to, the real basis behind haiku is that there are two or more images that are juxtaposed within the haiku that lead to what I call the discovery of the luminous in the commonplace. So it's kind of a mouthful, but it's really a poem. It's an aha moment. It's really, there's a coalescence of the world coming together, of the universe coming together, and in that coalescence, that haiku moment that has great resonance. Regarding that firewall that you're speaking about, I think that in larger poetry circles, in the larger poetry world, I think haiku is not really seen as, at least in North America or in America, not really seen as a viable poetic practice, or but it's somewhat light, which it's not. It's actually there are several people, I don't know about many, but some of the pioneers, some of the practitioners, such as Robert Speece, who edited Modern Haiku, John Wills, one of my favorite haiku poets, who wrote some amazingly fine and resonant haiku. People like that have really contributed greatly to the genre, and I think that firewall that you're speaking about, I think that oftentimes I've found that people who are only writing haiku do not read other kinds of poetry, and I think oftentimes people who write long poems or who work in other genres may not really read haiku, and when they do, I think that they might even misread it or not give it a lot of credence. I'm not sure if I think I would need more time, but I tried to answer your question.
Well, thank you. Yeah. It's just kind of strange to me, and like you said, that people who write different forms, don't read haiku, and vice versa though too, where the haiku issue that we published. Well, it's Japanese forms, issue number 47. Sold out
Right.
really, really quickly. It was, yeah. We have, well, we might have a few issues left, but it's almost sold out of extra copies, which no other more recent issues are. And but then it seems like people who are haiku fans, they bought that issue, but they didn't buy other issues of Rattle or subscribe generally. And so it kind of, I wonder if regular free verse, poetry or narrative poetry doesn't work on the same level. So maybe the people who find that aha moment inspiring don't get the same connection with a more narrative poem. Do you think that's the case?
I think that might be the case, or that might be viable. Certainly. I hosted Billy Collins at Trinity College in 1999, and we over the years, the last 20 years, we although I've not been in contact with him recently, but Billy writes haiku, and we have kept in touch, and he and I had we had spoken. He has a wonderful poem. This is my point. He has a wonderful poem entitled Japan, which is a long narrative poem, and he speaks about haiku throughout the poem, and there's a certain haiku moment in the long poem, and I think that's an example, I think, of a kind of crossover. I think Billy does that rather well. But I'm not sure if I can speak any more to it.
Well, thank you, Wally. You have 3 more poems you wanted to read. Do you want to? And from the other 2 books, you want to run through those to close us out?
I'd really like to do that. This poem is entitled. This is from The Map of Eternity, which was published in the autumn of 2018. And this is Rilke at Chateau des Mouzeaux. How you must have moved with such abundant grace between the 2 writing desks Manning wonderly sent to you at the Chateau des Mouzeaux in Veras, the one on which you finished the Duino Elegies, the first desk delivered, and the second sent by your patron because she was unsure the first ever arrived, upon which you wrote the Orpheus sonnets. How you must have moved in that February light between one desk and another, beneath the postcard of Orpheus tacked up by your current lover, Valadin Klasaska, your inspiration, leaving you alone to compose in such enviable solitude. As you wrote the mother of the dead young dancer whom you dedicated the sonnets to, Vera Ukama Noop's ghost was commanding and impelling you. How chilling, how vital that must have been to hear Vera's voice calling out to you, whispering as if she were Eurydice and you were her Orpheus. How you must have danced from one desk to another as a hurricane of the spirit blew through your inner thread and webbing. How you must have held Eurydice in your arms, then heard Vera calling as you awakened each morning, as an angel might, as we now listen and are held by you. And this, Tim, is a poem entitled Hydrangea. This would be the penultimate poem I'd be reading tonight. These deciduous plants adorn the lawns on which they lavish panicles, large white flower heads growing among spear-shaped evergreen leaves. The bushes are as showy as their flowers, that are often thought to resemble pom-poms. Every spring and summer I observe their enormous blossoms bob among their greenery as if noticing someone one hasn't seen for however long, and whose name is momentarily gone, as I forget their names every season. The flowers bloom steadily through midsummer into August lushness, then begin their pink blush in the late summer coolness among the first harbingers of the frosts of autumn. Each year the flowers are dried and sold on roadside stands to celebrate the turning of the great wheel of summer. And each year I finally remember, then forget until next season, when the hydrangea blooms so whitely, while my memory slips away ever so much from year to year until it maybe lapses entirely. Hydrangea, may I remember your name, as I might inhale your spicy fragrance. May I recall in winter the murmur of your petals, whispering on the summer wind. And the last poem I'll be reading tonight is entitled Distance, and this is a childhood memory. What I remember most about the drive north to Connecticut from Miami is the blueness of the rainy evenings, the stopping at diners for our meals, fragrant with coffee, burgers, and fries, flipping through the selections on the jukebox, the rhythms of the doo-wop beating in time with the raindrops, striking the windows of our booth, Sinatra's voice soothing the poignance of the storm. Then there was the smell of mothballs and Bibles filling the emptiness of motel room drawers, my father visibly aching from the long drive, my mother's interminable patience that everything would all work out when we arrived in Milford to reconnect with friends, to visit with her cousins in Ansonia, worrying that she needed to enroll me in parochial school before the school year began, intuiting the need to finish things before her unexpected collapse from her cerebral hemorrhage, to die 6 days later on the operating table, leaving behind a son immersed in the amber of catatonia, a husband who would wear his bereavement as he would bear a wound. However, it was in our driving beneath the hanging Spanish moss in Georgia, when we passed a chain gang in their red and white stripes, that I met the gaze of an African-American man with an animated face, quizzically meeting my eyes, looking out the backseat window, his expression intimating to me how much he wanted to be unchained again, to be able to put down his pickaxe and to get out of the heat, to quit the punishing road work of breaking stones, to throw off the gravity of the iron weighing down his limbs, and as our car continued up the road, to climb in with us, to release himself from his captivity, to revel in seeing the distance accrue into the magnitude of the passing landscape, the stark glassiness of his eyes staying with me all of these years, the pleading in them, his dire face expressing the dread I would come so well to know myself, that openly relayed, please, don't leave me behind.
Thanks so much, Wally. A beautiful, beautiful poem. I didn't get a chance to read that book. What does "Candling the Eggs" mean? That's such a strange title.
I suppose it is such a strange title. I think after the fact, I don't regret choosing that title poem. "Candling the Eggs." That regards another childhood memory. My father had what was at times, although he could be a generous man, he had a pretty violent temper, and my mother would send me as a very small child next door to the Dornishes, and Mrs. Dornish would take me downstairs, and it was catacomb-like, Tim, downstairs. The walls were wet, and we would candle eggs, and she had cookies in her apron pocket, and it was my first spiritual experience. The book is called "Candling the Eggs." My intent in that was that each poem would be could be considered an egg that the reader could possibly candle, bring up to the light, and to look at. So that's why I did entitle the book that. But I think that in this era, it might seem a little arcane.
Well, it's a cool title and a great set of books. Wally, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure talking to you tonight and hearing your poems.
Tim, thank you so much.
Yeah, have a good night. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
And that was Wally Swist. And if you want to find more on Wally Swist, actually his website wasn't working. So you can just Google, go to Amazon and type in Wally Swist, and you'll find all his books. He has a bunch of them available there. And I hope you enjoyed this interview and reading with Wally. If you did, please click on the like button or share it, or make sure you're subscribed, however you're listening. We're going to take a little bit of break like we always do, and we will go to the open mics. If you'd like to call in on the open mic, all you have to do is send me a message on Skype, and send it to Rattle Poetry, a chat message. I will reply and let you know you're on, and then we will call you back when the time is right. Let's see. And so that's if you're watching live. If you're watching, just listening through iTunes or Stitcher or any of those podcasting apps, that's all for now. We don't include the open mic on that part of the show. But hope you enjoyed this, and hope you have a great week. Next week we will have, let me put up next week's poet. We're going to have Nicole Brown, To Those Who Are Our First Gods. It's her most recent chapbook. She's also the author of a book, Sister, novel in verse, and she has a new book forthcoming too. It's a really great poet. Really a pleasure to publish To Those Who Are Our First Gods, which was winner of the 2018 Rattle Chapbook Prize. So I hope you can join us then for Nicole Brown. We'll see you next week. And if you're staying for the open mic, I'll see you in just a couple minutes. Good night. Well, hello again. It's me. Thanks for sticking around for the open mic. Hope you enjoy this. We have 4 poems pre-recorded, and it's been kind of a light show today. I think there are only 14 people watching live at the moment. But if you would like to join in, please do send me a chat message on Skype, and we will call you and talk to you. We can share a poem, especially something you published recently. That's always good. Or you can just kind of chat if you want. So if anybody wants to chat and hang out and share a poem, just send a chat message to Rattle Poetry. But let's do some open mic poems first. We'll start with that. Let's see. So the first poet for right now is Nicole Jenkins. And Nicole Jenkins lives in Ormond Beach, Florida. She says, I dibble and dabble in poetry. It lets me allow my emotions to flow. That's a great reason to write poetry. Let's see. So here she is, Nicole Jenkins.
This is my poem. It's entitled Street Life. My name's Nicole Jenkins. I wave out of Ormond Beach. I kind of dibble and dabble in poetry. Here it goes. Street life was calling you. She was whispering in your ear. I begged, I prayed, I pleaded to keep you from going there. She was your mistress, your woman of the night. She knew how to handle you and call your name just right. After the night died down, you'd return to my care. You knew that a place to rest your head and grab a bite was waiting right here. But this person knew you more than you knew yourself. This person sat and waited for you to find your true self. The true self is the person that you were destined to be. Your true self is the only match for me.
And that was Nicole Jenkins reading Street Life. Thanks so much, Nicole. Let's see. Pranshu Sharma's here. Soul Sciences just asked for our Skype address. So maybe Soul Sciences, if you want to call in on Skype and join with us live. Our Skype address is Rattle Poetry, really easy, all one word. I'll pop up. Just send me a little chat message. I'll accept. I will say that you're on, and then we will call you back when the time is right. But let's go to another poem. Let's see what's next. This is, here we go. Let me put this up on screen. This is Rooja Mohassessy. Rooja Mohassessy from Dobbins, California. Let's see. She was born in Iran and has lived in Europe, Asia, and the United States. She is currently pursuing an MFA in poetry at Pacific University. Her poetry has appeared or is forthcoming in the Woven Tale Press, Poet Lore, a bunch of other places. And this poem was originally published in Tuck magazine. So here she is, Rooja Mohassessy.
Hi Tim, hello everyone. My name is Rooja Mohassessy and I am recording from Northern California, from the Sierra foothills, from a little town called Dobbins. And the poem I'll be reading tonight is about the garbage crisis in Lebanon. At some point in Lebanon, well, actually I should first say that the poem was first published in Tuck magazine in 2018. And in Lebanon, at one point they had no proper way of disposing of their trash, and they began dumping it into the Mediterranean Sea as a land reclamation project, which obviously did not work out. The title of the poem, "This Used to Be the Sea, One Day We Looked Out, We Couldn't See the Sea," is a quote that I took out of a Reuters article by Ellen Francis, which was published on February 4th, 2018, and I used this article to inform my poem. And the title is a quote by R.P. Cruzion, as she is quoted in this article. And the title of the article is "No End to Crisis in Sight as Lebanon's Garbage Mountains Grow." This used to be the sea. One day we looked out, we couldn't see the sea. The mountain began disappearing in truckloads. It was erected during the Civil War, axiomatic proof that wars do not cause dearth, but excess, not exactly abundance, but sufficient dirt to add a mountain to the earth. And we called it Borj Hamoud Mountain, a soft yawn of sentient slumber that knew our city's intimate rhythms, our rapacious appetite, and our daily cleansing rituals, the shedding of leftover errors and facts as unbecoming as half-formed contaminated children and mangled steel. It crawled with long snakes and our meek beliefs in the Samaritan gestures intended to pile up in good time and absolve the city of dross. And refrigerators, so many refrigerators that could no longer preserve our dewy dreams, yet they refused to thaw into the thin air of our expectations. And we carried on at the seaside, encased in our whitewashed Mediterranean walls, adorned with azure tiles, fortified illusions that couldn't keep the strident stench out. It rammed itself into rooms. It had no need to ooze beneath doors into basements. It appeared through sheer will. While we waited patiently for a change in the direction of toxic wind, we taught the children how to inhale in smaller sips. Borj Hamoud Mountain, our communal black hole of nondescript inequity, topped with dirt, a cat half covering her dump, innocent enough. Then the mountain began disappearing, a procession of trucks glowing with heavy metal, radioactive green and microplastic, teeming with sluggish bacteria and dripping thin juice, passed our doors accompanied daily by a faithful flock of seagulls until the mountain was expunged, though the rats remained like loyal pets, and we had reclaimed our natural land. Then one numbered day our fishermen returned with mad talk of scaled creatures floating on the sea like slaughter, of fetid screams that bubbled in pain and refused to lie down on their sides. And one unconscionable morning we gazed out the window to find we had shoved the sea out of our way.
And once again, that was Rooja Mohassessy from, where's she from? I lost that page. But reading her poem. Oh, what was that? I better find it again. Okay, she's from Dobbins, California, and that was This Used to Be the Sea. One day we looked out, we couldn't see the sea. A beautiful title and a powerful poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Rooja. Okay, so we're going to do another. Let's see, next on the open mic, I said I'd do Jayanta Desgupta. I think a friend of hers is here, and so is she, waiting for this poem. Here she is with a bookmark. And Jayanta Desgupta lives in Ithaca, New York. She's an MFA student at Cornell and grew up in India. And here's her poem, The Bookmark.
The Bookmark. A man never steps in the same stream twice. The man is never the same man, and the stream is never the same stream. I sit abandoned on the same page for as long as I can remember. I'm numb, burdened by the weight of pages that fall on my back. The same leaf, the same book, with no sign of air. I remember a moist touch. That was the last feeling I had embraced. Were they droplets of rain or a fountain of tears, there's no way I can phrase. That was the last I felt a page turn. Affection. Now it all comes back, like a jolt of lightning to me. I remember jogging past pages. Oh, how wonderful days they were. The tumultuous ways of Africa, the city blaze of America, the wild forests of Amazon and the arid nights of Arabia. I've traveled across the world and spanned the universe in these books. Beautiful books they were. Some grim, others funny. Some intense, others blurry. Some plots started with Once Upon a Time, while others with the plot number of the Dursley family in Surrey. Some books were tragic, others were romantic, some were timeless and classy, others were modern and hippie. Some had intense, sorry climaxes, while others ended with they lived happily ever after. I've seen different sceneries, the roaring seas, soft rains, majestic hills, everywhere we traveled, embedded in the books you took along. I remember the scorching sun as I basked and laid on the seashore while you flipped pages. I listened to the sea of emotions as they came crushing on the shore. I also remember the cozy blanket wrapped around which you read, the steaming hot tea and the simmering kettle on the stove. A little bird came religiously every morning to say hello, sitting on the window frame overlooking the dreamy snow-capped hills. I've been with you on numerous flights and countless MRT rides. The book's cover changed, but I never did. Despair. Moving from one book to another, I've seen and shown you life just as is. But I feel lifeless now. Is this a pause or the end, I wonder? The book I rest on hasn't flipped in ages. I wonder if I did something wrong for you to desert me here under. In all honesty, I've only tried being an honest companion. I've read with you from cover to cover. I long to see you now, perhaps in misery and despair. Unrelenting and unforgiving of the horrible past that once came to you unprepared. It was only a phase that you have never been able to repair. You and I are internalizing this page and the words written the longer we stay here. The longer I stay here, this page becomes my only reality, my only identity to prepare. The elixir of life has gone missing, but we had only started out. I wish we could go on a little longer. Hope. I wonder what more is out there to be seen. I wonder how beautiful and sad and intense and exciting and horrifying and brittle and picturesque the unseen is. I loved engaging and smelling the books you brought to me. They made me feel so alive. Something in my gut still tells me it's not all over yet. I'm hopeful we will go on a little longer. Why are you hung up on that character? There's more to life for sure. Buckle up and trust yourself and be brave to acknowledge light at the end of the tunnel. I know, it's easier said than done. Perhaps that's why I am here for. Take a leap of faith, pick a book, and let's read together. Like good old days, we will travel the world together. We will see the beautiful and the intense and the exciting and the horrifying, the brittle and the pictures unseen. I know you've stopped believing given the circumstances, but doesn't a flight always take off against the winds? I realize by staying here longer, I'm becoming bitter and brittle like a leaf kept in a high school diary. But I haven't given up hope. I know the page will turn. What was written will be undone. As I gather dust on the bookshelf, I'm hopeful for a new book to come, for a new page to turn.
And once again, that was Jayanta Desgupta from Ithaca, New York. Ithaca is my favorite city in the entire world. What a great small city that is. I wish I got to live in. If I could pick one place, I would probably pick Ithaca. Let's see, we have one more pre-recorded poet, but if there's still a chance, if anybody watching would like to try Skype and has the app on your phone or iPad or whatever you're looking through, just send me a chat message to Rattle Poetry. But in the meantime, we'll do this last poem, and let's see what we've got. This is Piere Ingram from Lakewood, Ohio. And Piere Ingram started writing when he was 7 years old as a way of escaping the darkness and sharing light in this world. What a great reason to write poetry. Thanks so much, Piere Ingram. And here he is reading his poem, My Life as a Kid.
Lost love. How do you love someone you never knew? This reflection is lost in the dew. What shall I do? This mirror looks back at.
Well, that wasn't the poem. The audio and text don't match up. Let's see. Should we play it? Maybe we'll just... Let's see. Well, I think I'll just play the poem, and y'all can listen. Okay? These are these open mics come in. If you go to rattle.com/rattlecast, you can submit a poem of your own, and send the text too, and we can put it on screen. But for some reason, I think you picked the wrong file or something like that. These are open mics, so I have no idea what's coming up, and I didn't, I don't match the tape to the recording to the text. But let's just do this. My life as a kid, and you have to use your imagination. I think it's clear enough. You can definitely hear. So here we go. This is a different poem by Piere Ingram.
Lost love. How do you love someone you never knew? This reflection is lost in the dew. What shall I do? This mirror looks back at someone I never knew. Lost love. This identity is all the above. This isn't me. I will not hold on to this any longer. Lost love. I'm not taking this anymore. I'm walking away. Don't go anywhere. Just stay. But this relationship weighs a ton on my heart. I could die without knowing the true why. This lost love was embedded in my heart. From the start, I'm not giving up until this lost love is found. Lost love.
Charlene, hi. I'm calling Charlene Jones. Click the turn off the YouTube stream so there's no feedback. And if you're on a window, click out of that, and I'll pull you in. So you're on screen, though. I see you and hear you really well. Okay, so we have you here, Charlene Jones, and you have a great connection. Let me resize your picture. Is so huge because you have such a good internet connection. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm delighted. Thank you, Tim, for setting all this up. It's amazing and wonderful.
It really is. It's my pleasure. So, are you Soul Sciences by any chance, or are you somewhere else?
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
Soul Science.
I figured you were. Yeah. So, yeah, you look great, and you sound great, and so where are you calling from?
Canada, near Toronto.
Excellent. More Toronto. There's so many callers we get from Toronto.
A lot of poets.
Yeah, and apparently really good internet connections because I gotta like shrink your video here so you can hang on a second. Okay, so I haven't noticed your name before. Have you watched the show before?
Yes. I was at the first show, and I'm aware of Rattle. I've had you send me some of the hard copy magazines, and I'm very impressed with the quality.
Ah, cool.
Wonderful.
Well, thanks so much. So what do you have for us tonight?
This is called Lilith, Fair and Square.
Awesome.
I am Lilith, first wife of Adam. You don't hear much about me. Your Yahweh Jehovah called me up and said, I got a favor to ask. You want to get married? I laughed. Oh God, after all this time, you and I have been friends, making oceans, gardens, mountains, playing at creation. Now you want, no, it's Adam. I did pause. This required some thought. The first lady of the garden, not bad. But I married him because God was on the spot. A whole world to populate and no one with whom Adam would copulate. So as a favor, mind you, to an old friend, I offered what I believe to be the greatest riches you can conceive. My body. This flesh, the earth, the blessed earth. But Adam could not see my worth. She won't lie beneath me, he whined to God. She wants to be on top half the time. God tried. He said, couldn't you accommodate her, son of mine? Adam said, but she's pig-headed, adventurous, creative, opinionated, daring, outspoken, enthusiastic, competitive, and well, God, for a girl, she's extremely odd. God said to me, now look, the kid's upset. He's new to this life, and well, he wants a different kind of wife. What say you go adventure and finish naming everything? He knew I'd do this anyway. You see, where he wanted to be the one God, that's why he invented Adam. I know real life thrusts in all life. I know he doesn't have as much control as for a sky god he thinks he should. I know the 1,000 names of God right here, right now, on the earth and its beauty. And if I wanted to, oh well, it didn't look so good being first lady in the garden after all. Not if I had to beg for affection and respect. I'd rather be out on what you might call the dark side of the moon, dancing on the thin line of the equator at noon. That's where you'll see me still, juggling all of creation and calling it by its real name. God, God roses, God rainbows, God drought, God rivers and waters, God sunshine, you know, you get the picture. Everything is God. I know that. That's why when I hear the press he gets, how God created everything, I just smile. I know everything created God.
Ooh, very nice. Thanks so much, Charlene Jones. That's a great poem and a great reading of it. Is that published anywhere?
Well, it's in a book called Bliss Pig, which is available on Amazon. Woo!
Terrific.
And there's a great friend of mine who's also published in there. Her name's Linda Stick. She's the poetry maven of Toronto. Thank you for your program.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for calling, and I hope you call in again and read some more. That was one of the best open mics over Skype we've had. Just a great connection, great poem, great reading. Excellent all around. Thanks so much.
I'm back. You're very flattering. Thank you.
Thank you, and have a great night.
You too.
Bye. So that was a great way to end the show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, of course, click the like button and all that jazz. I don't want to go through this every time, but you have to, because when I say it, people do it, and it really actually does help, because we want to be, on YouTube and wherever, we want to be like up next. So, and the more you click the like button, the more we'll be up next, and that's always good. So once again, next week we have an excellent show. Nicole Brown's going to be joining us. She's the author of 2018 Rattle Chapbook Prize winning book, To Those Who Are First Gods. Really one of the, it's literally the best-selling chapbook we've had. And she's also the author of Sister, which is a book that's so good it was printed twice. So I hope you can join us for that show. And I will talk to you later. Have a good night.